if I saw another day, only to scream into the night. Nothing ever tries to change, even if I want to realize. 'Cause I've been sitting here, same old ways, thinking of about the same mistake. Darling, when you go away, it won't be as simple for you.
Yo guys, we're back. It's Oman G here, Adidas back for another sales update. I'm joined again by the lovely Tom the journalist, our go-to journalist when it comes to Manchester United sales update news. So before we get into it, if you are new to the channel, remember to like, share and subscribe to Red Devil Studio. Follow us on Twitter on X and smash the notification button. Also, before Tom, are you just the background is a little bit you have to lower it down a little bit, is that okay?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, you're good. Yeah, that's better. Awesome. Thank you very much. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Really appreciate it. So I think Dave Sweeters, Evan Carpy, Footy Fellas, etc. Shout out to everyone. Obviously, we'll obviously talk a bit about what Mike Keegan has posted regarding the Glazers still wanting to sell. A bit of news coming from obviously Qatar as well. We'll add in some transfer stuff as well, Amrabat and obviously the players that are going. But obviously, we only really like to do obviously sales updates. We'll at least have something new. It's been a bit quiet on the sales, and as you can imagine. But yeah, let's get into it. I mean, first of all, like Tom, how are you doing? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm doing good, G, and yeah, thanks for having me on again as always, and yeah, we'll hopefully can provide probably a bit of insight into what's obviously going on today, and obviously some of the talking points and topics we've discussed.
Cool. Okay, so let's quickly start with a bit about Mike Keegan, but obviously what you as you've been made aware of well. Mike Keegan, I think, posted with Daily Mail, basically saying that obviously things are quiet, and the Glazers are somewhat disappointed that they've not got the $6 billion evaluation they believe that they deserve, but that they do still want to sell the club and are actively, wanting to sell the club. So is that what you're hearing? Is that what are you hearing, Tom?
Yeah, I've said really throughout always that the Glazer family, if you go near £6 billion, they're prepared to sell. That's their evaluation of what they would take to leave Manchester United right now. And I know there's been some reports circulating around that they want 8 billion or upwards of those sort of figures. When they were coming into it, that's what they wanted. But when they actually spoke to proper financial people and Rain advised them what the best price that they could get for Manchester United was, they can get over the market value, which the market value of Manchester United is around £3.5 billion. I think it's upwards of maybe $5 billion, something around that sort of figure. And
I'm still amazed they thought that they could get 8 billion for Manchester United. That's actually insane.
They see it obviously from the brand's perspective, but also in recent years they have had interesting parties that have wanted to buy United for the last 10 years. Yeah. Qatar, before they went and bought PSG, had looked at buying United in 2010, and then they couldn't get a deal or an agreement in place when they were trying to negotiate terms with the Red Knights at the time. And then in 2011, they went and, QSI anyway, the sporting arm of Qatar, went and bought Paris Saint-Germain Football Club. And really, it's never been talked about ever since then. And obviously, I think it would have been I could be wrong in thinking this, I think it was around 2019, you had Saudi Arabia that were looking to invest into a football club. And
Yeah.
they at the time had looked at Manchester United as the biggest prized asset, and at the time United in 2019 weren't such a good football club. They weren't where they are say today, and financially they were still losing money. It was as clear as to say, and it was pre-COVID as well, and then through COVID obviously it wasn't great as well. And the Glazer family, well, Avram himself anyway, he actually went to a cricket conference where the Glazer family were bidding for an Indian cricket team, but they held the conference in Saudi Arabia, in I think it was Riyadh that they actually held it in. And he spoke to members from PIF, the same PIF that has just bought Newcastle United and funds four of Saudi Arabia's football clubs right now. And they, at the time, wanted investment. They didn't want to sell. They wanted money coming in to build a new stadium, to make big investments. And what they proposed to the Saudis was that we will give you 30% of United for £700 million at the time, because that's what they believed the market value of United was worth back then. But when we get to the stage now, they've always had interested parties from the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, as I've just said there, they were an interested party in United. Qatar, for over upwards of a decade ago, were interested in United, and they're back again, trying to get the football club. And really, where everybody wants to invest in sports, and where the money is right now in the world for anybody, whether you're a footballer, a boxer, anybody really, a golfer even, like sports is Middle East hub. It's centric around that because they can offer the money to any sportsman, and it'd probably change their life, if not for generations of their childhoods or ancestors to come. So, in speaking about that, the Glazer family, as I say, have been consulted by their advisors themselves in the Rothschilds and also via Rain Group. And as I said months ago, Rain Group had said to the Glazer family, pursue a full sale where possible. And at that sort of time, Sir Jim Ratcliffe was still proposing to buy 69%. So essentially all the shares. So it wasn't a case of they were choosing either or of the options. And the sort of murmurs that were coming out around about 2 weeks ago were that Rain Group had advised them to sell to Sheikh Jassim, because that's the only full sale option that doesn't have legal implication, but also can give them the best package deal right here and now. But the only problem is the Sheikh Jassim deal, as far as I'm aware, doesn't hit the £6 billion asking price. But it's within the sphere. And look, NDA agreements prohibit financial leakage around numbers. But the sort of murmurs that were coming out around the US after the fifth Qatar offer were in and around the regions of £5.5 billion. But the problem with Qatar is they haven't disclosed the numbers correctly in terms of the way that you've bidded in the process has been in dollars. And because there's a fluctuation between dollars and pounds, that's where the issue is, because you're bidding for a business which is British based. So obviously any transfer would have to go in pounds, but the currency essentially that you're bidding and that would then get sold to the sellers would have to be in dollars. So it's very complicated, and Qatar and Sheikh Jassim's group haven't disclosed the numbers correctly or the pattern, at least up to the third round of bids. Fourth and fifth rounds, we don't know because the disclosures aren't there for the numbers. But when they were going from first bid to second to third, they hadn't accurately shown the numbers within if it met the £6 billion asking price. Whereas where we are now is that it's understood that after the fourth and fifth bids, they have disclosed the numbers very clear cut and clearly as to this is our offer and this is what you would get in dollars to you guys as the sellers, but then this is what we would pay for the football club in pounds based upon it's a British asset, not an American asset. Therefore, the sale has to go through in pounds, but they're bidding in dollars. So I know that's a bit of a mouthful for people to get their head around, but the way the Rain Group have set it up is because they're a New York-based merchant bank, they have to do business and transactions in dollars. Therefore, they're having to bid like that. And really, I think that's where the theory from the beginning came from, where Qatar were going to come in here and blow everybody out of the water. And look, let's not, be hesitant in saying it. They could still do that. And I believe that is, still an option actively now, that they could just pay the full asking price. But the murmurs from the Sheikh Jassim camp, just to finish off the point, is that they don't want to overpay for Manchester United as a football club, based upon that it would ruin their plans and what they have as a future for Manchester United. And what I mean by that is anything that they would want to buy or pay for. And I'm not just talking a player. I'm not just talking a director of football. I'm talking actual land potentially around where Old Trafford is situated right now. If you want to buy a housing complex or a plot of land in and around Old Trafford potentially, you're going to have to be paying top dollar just to get the land to build it on, because these employers or these other business entrepreneurs know that you've just paid a big asking price for a very, an overpaying really for a football club that's shouldn't be valued at £6 billion from any financial expert. So the way it is right now is that the Glazer family are being fully advised to sell, and Rain Group had advised the Glazer family weeks ago that, well, Sheikh Jassim's your only option for a full sale. That's what we believe you should do. But you guys are the owners. You've employed us, not the other way around. We're just telling you what we believe you should do best. But again, it comes down to the point of, do the Glazer family really want to sell, or do they want some sort of stake in United for the future? But the way that it's gone from so forth is that every single financial advisor or aide around the Glazer family have always said throughout that pursue a full sale where possible. And in the last few weeks, as I reported last time when we did a stream on a sales process, is that the Rain Group, especially, who have been leading the actual sale and negotiations on behalf of the Glazer family, have said to the Glazer family to go with the Sheikh Jassim offer. But as I say, the offer doesn't meet the £6 billion asking price. And thus, we are where we are.
I'm on mute. I was speaking. I'm on mute. Sorry.
I was going to say,
thanks for that. I'll just quickly read some comments and then I'll just ask a few questions, just be more specific before we kind of move on. So Dad Sweet says they have to sell, they just want more money. Everything Creepy says they don't have to do anything with this Adidas deal. That's an interesting, and I'll come back to that. We'll talk about that. That's one of the questions I wanted to bring up, but I'm going to go through your comments, guys. But that's a good point, everything, Carpy. I agree. I think Qatar have taken over already, hence the Adidas deal. Where's the money coming from? Where they meant to have 120 mil of FFP. Okay, interesting. They did the same with PSG, spent money before getting out. Maybe wrong, just adds up. That's all. Fair enough. Jason has a timer. Anyone? Ooh, what's happening? So if I crashed, yeah, I'm fine. I don't know what happened there. Anyone know any Manchester United news reports? I think Lloyd Whitwell works for the Manchester United News, but we have our good friend Tom here. Alfie Land is a good. Oh, yeah, it's good. David Ormsey, right? Yeah, shout out to David Ormsey. Yeah, Mike. One of the things we're talking is what Mike Keegan said, reacting to it. Essentially, the fact that Glazers are still interested in selling the football club, just regarding the asking price not met. So I think that does dispel, because I think that a lot of people, and I think, a lot of people were talking about how Sheikh Jassim put this mega offer. And I suspect it must have been significant, because they've not announced. It might have been that there are complications regarding the Sir Jim Ratcliffe bid. I'm not sure, but obviously I'll come back to that. Philip says, "Evening all. Thank you for joining the chat, buddy. Remember to like the guys. We've got 70+ people watching. If you like that, sorry, 2 seconds. And apologies about being a bit slow. My hand is broken. Who's the person with you on the Red Devil Good Journalist versus the Footy? Shout out to the Footy. It's Tom. It's Tom. And yes, Tom is a good journalist. None of this clickbaity sort of stuff. Just someone who just no BS. Just says it how it is. You know. Everything Carby says. Why do people say 6 billion valuation? They have over 6.5 billion US dollars on the table. Sheikh says, obviously, big up Red Devil, my boy Tom. And yes, that answers your question. He is. Shawat says, how can the Glazers justify this 6 billion asking price? Because as you heard earlier, Showcat, like they actually initially wanted 8 billion. They initially wanted 8 billion, and they were advised, no, 6 billion is the market, is closer to the market evaluation for Manchester United. Arguably, it's probably 4.5 billion. You know, so I mean, if anything, they were overestimating at the club. They wanted more bidders, and now Qatar have the upper hand. Yes, I think there's something to be said about that. Do you guys know? I do know David Ornstein is. Yes, we do. I do think David Ornstein is reliable. Shout to Red Devil Hangout. I think you might be new to the come, so shout to you. Thank you for joining. David T, big up David T, member of the channel, says, according to what I've heard from here, the last time the Glazers have started putting their money in because our covers have dried up. Is not the case. I don't think they'd want to hold on to a failing asset. And I'll ask Tom that. Mo Water, big up Mo, says, if they won't sell below the asking price, why is this still going on? And again, that's another point. We'll come back to that question. Is Anti-Mitten live? I'm not sure about Anti-Mitten. Big T, can a company on the public stock be sold in secret? We'll come back to that as well. Charlie Malman says, Mike Keegan has been the biggest flip-flop ever. Cannot trust a word he writes anymore. One when he says this, the other when he says something completely different. I mean, in fairness to Mike Keegan, Mike Keegan, he hasn't he's not like one of the journalists, right? That he posts almost every week. Like he usually, I get the impression Mike Keegan, he posts based on the information that he gets. And usually, and sometimes that might be slightly different. Remember, this is a fluid process. It's a very fluid process. And the non-disclosure agreements basically tell us that no one knows how much Sir Jim or Sheikh Jassim's bids are actually worth. All we know for sure is that none of them have been close to the 6 billion on the dot or more. We know that for a fact, but we don't know whether Sheikh Jassim's is really close to it. It could be like 5.9, 5.7, 5.5, 5.3. Who knows? We don't know. The Glazers are trying to science this man. I know, and it's a bit of a worry. We'll never have anyone like Faber. That's all. Sugar says, is the Qatari offer it does include the debt. It does include the debt. That's one of the big differences between this offer and the Jim Ratcliffe offer is that this actually does include the debt. Let me just quickly go back to some questions. Can I ask Tom? So quick Tom. So obviously you know about the Adidas deal, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that this has an impact on the sale, or why does this lean one towards the other, or is this just completely separate?
Personally, I think this is from no context, but this is what I would interpret it from it, is that when you sign a big sports deal with a big brand like Adidas, for Manchester United, and this is no disrespect to other sports brands, I think there's only ever maybe 2-3 big sports groups or sports brands that they could ever have a shirt sponsor with. That's either Adidas, Nike, or Jordan. Really, as big sports brands, they're the only big ones that I could ever see United having as their big main shirt sponsor. And look, the Adidas deal is, as it's been entailed, it's basically £900 million for a 10-year agreement in principle to still have it as a shirt sponsor. But even as the bidders, from what I understood, was any sort of deals, appointments, discussions, these talking points had been outlined to the bidders that, look, even though you're still buying the football club, we still need to run the football club as it is now. based upon if, say, for example, a deal didn't get agreed with either of you two, well, we're still ahead of the game still as a business. Or if we do the deal, we've basically put other steps in place already for you. And even if Sir Jim Ratcliffe or Sheikh Jassim come in the door tomorrow and this Adidas deal is still there and it's obviously been signed and on the dotted line for an agreement, they're going to take it on because it saves them hassle having to go out there and negotiate with a new shirt sponsor. And Adidas is already one of the biggest sports brands that you can have in the world. So it really helps the bidders out should they get the football club. But obviously, I think a lot of people, just as fans can interpret that as, oh, they're staying, they signed a 10-year agreement, they're not going anywhere. Well, they made that announcement in November last year that they wanted strategic alternatives of either investment or potentially a sale. They made that because out of desperation, because they need money into Manchester United. They haven't got that pot of cash reserves on the side that they can take dividends out of anymore. They can't do it. And like I say, it's coming to the edge of the tipping point now where they either have to invest their own money or they have to get investment in. And they're trying to do that now, either get investment in potentially from Sir Jim, or they still, as I say, got minority investment groups there, or you have the potential to, do you know what? We've come 18 years now. This wasn't even ours. This was what our father set up, not even us. Let's walk away with £6 billion. And the thing that I look at it with the Glazer family's perspective is, within the world of sports, they have two of the most prized sporting assets that you can have. A Premier League football club and an NFL team. And they have two of them. And one of whom in United can, as you say, if they're, like we say, they're asking around £6 billion. Well, there's £6 billion there. An NFL team, I've heard record figures that people are paying for NFL teams of upwards of $4 to $5 billion US. Like, they have two sporting assets that equally in valuation could reach over 10 billion easily. Not even flinching. If they got the sort of offers that they were looking for to be bought out. And in saying that with the Glazer family, as I say, they're at the point now where there has to be a new stadium if they want to get the big revenue deals, if they want to get the big deals with the NFL, with sports organisations. I mean, I think even though the Glazer family, as people say, they don't have an attachment to United, for them to see that Manchester United isn't going to be used as a facility for the Euros, or potentially if England or the UK were to try and host the World Cup, when Old Trafford doesn't make the ballot sheet for, I think it was the 2028 European Championships, when United as stadium don't make that ballot sheet, that hurts the Glazer family's pockets because they aren't going to get any of the finances from their stadium, which isn't going to be in use. Therefore, they're making no money whilst there's a big European Championship where the Etihad's going to be used. Anfield will probably be used. All your rivals around you are going to be making money while you're going to be what? Doing nothing, essentially. And that's why at this point now, in terms of, say, the Adidas deal, it's a big multi-million-pound negotiation, almost £1 billion deal that's in principle. So anybody who's buying a multi-billion-pound football club will need to know that that's happening. So you can interpret it from the perspective of the Glazer family might stay. That's your opinion. But you interpret it from a different perspective. There's only ever really three big sporting brands that can ever probably be United's main shirt sponsor: Adidas, Nike, or Jordan. And you've already got an agreement in with one of them that you've had for years. And basically, you've taken their big, high-level negotiator in Matt Hargreaves and brought him to Manchester United. I think that shows the strength of the agreement between Adidas and Manchester United. So an agreement was going to come either way, but I think it helps the bidders more so because it gives them one less thing that they have to sort out before getting in the door. Either or of Sir Jim Ratcliffe or for Sheikh Jassim. Or, as you say, if the Glazer family want to stay, well, they've got an agreement there. So it helps them out in that sense. But the only difference is with that deal, over the full tenure of the deal, they only get upwards of, say, £90 million of an agreement, or upwards of those sort of figures. That's it. They don't get any more in terms of major investment. So this Adidas deal isn't going to pay for a new stadium in the long term. It isn't going to pay for new players. Really, all it's going to do is just improve the revenues in United and maybe pay off the interest payments on the debt year after year. That's all it will do. It will just basically pick away at little points of where the Glazer family have manipulated the football club for so many years, but it's not going to improve anything. That's the difference.
Thanks for that, Tom. Right, David Teeth says, according to what I've heard from last time, the Glazers started putting the money in because the Glazers started putting the money in because our coffers have dried up. In that case, I don't think they'd want to hold on to a failing asset. So in a sense, saying that, like, you know, the Glazers probably still want to sell, you know, because they don't want to hold on to like a failing asset. I assume is what David Teeth is referring to. Mawada says, if they won't sell at below the so that's a good question. If they won't sell at below the asking price, why is it still going in? I think that's a question that a lot of people are asking, and why this thing just drugs on is that it's kind of like, what is the, and this has been my question this whole process, is that, okay, if you haven't got the money that you want, right, and you were like, you know what, we're disappointed, etc., that's it, okay, we're just going to just ignore it, we're just going to move on. They would just say that, and then you think that you get that, and they just move on. Or if they wanted Sajim, or if they wanted Sheikh Jassim, I don't know. What I don't understand is why that there is this sort of persistent radio silence, you know, or is it that these guys genuinely believe they can still squeeze more money? Because we know that the Sheikh Jassim and the Sajim aren't going to change. Well, we know the Sajim bid isn't going to change. The Sheikh Jassim bid may change if they actually are in contact, but they seem to be keeping both in radio silence. So, Tom, why do you think that there is just this, you know, like, why are we still in this limbo? If that makes any sense, like, what is the, you know, is it just that they just want to find more money? But don't they kind of know that, like, no one else is really going to give the United the valuation that these two guys are?
Well, I think, you know, to probably give the context to it is, when they came into this, they was expecting a free-for-all. They expected, the way that I interpreted it anyway from the Glazer family was that when they had made the announcement in November, parties were making their interest known in late January, early February, and then you had the proposed bidders, you know, formalising that they were interested with rain in March, and that's where you had the Qatari Royals sort of saga that came out, and then you had the statements from Sajim Ratcliffe on behalf of Ineos and Sheikh Jassim on behalf of the 9-2 Foundation to formally enter the process to buy Manchester United. The interpretation at the time, and it was actually given valid context because it had been, you know, it had been doubly sourced by many journalists, was that there was many interested parties in buying United. There was upwards of 20 interested parties reportedly that had ranged from Middle Eastern parties. There was at least 2 big Saudi Arabian investment companies that were interested in buying or bidding for Manchester United, but they never formalised the interest. And that would have been from the private sector, not from PIF, just to disclose that anyway, for any that sort of implication that might have happened with Newcastle. It was private sector from Saudi Arabia. You had interest coming from Asia. There was a Thai businessman who was a passionate Manchester United fan that had been spouting up in recent years about that he would be interested potentially in buying United, but he never formalised the interest at the time. You know, there was many interests, and the big one for the Glazer family was that the US market, and there was US billionaires that were interested in buying United, or at least bidding for it. I've come on here many times and I disclosed at least one of those interested parties, and that was Stephen Pagaluka of the Boston Celtics. He tried to buy Chelsea Football Club. He'd always valued the Premier League market, and Manchester United were the biggest Premier League club on the market at the time, aside Liverpool. So he never formalised interest in trying to purchase either of them in the end, but the reason being that a lot of the bidders were put off was no businessman looks at Manchester United at £6 billion and think it's a good investment. Because even when you get the club for £6 billion, there is so much work that needs to be done. And unless you have either a master plan or an endless pit of cash, it's going to take a lot of investment before you ever make your money back. So to some people at their maybe age profiles, they may be 6 feet under before they actually see the end of their building project of United. That's the way that it's interpreted by a lot. But with how the Glazer family have looked at it, the reason being why there's this hold-up is the Glazer family want more money. And as I say, nobody has hit the £6 billion asking price that they have set. I've already reiterated, the Rain Group have advised them pursue full sale where possible. The only full sale option that is on the table right now is SHEIKH JASSIM. Therefore, they have formalised and said to the Glazer family, sell to SHEIKH JASSIM. But it's not for the £6 billion asking price. That's the difference. If this was £6 billion that SHEIKH JASSIM had put in straight away here and now, and the Qataris, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But even if they do so, there's nothing stopping the Glazer family from saying, oh, we've paid £6. Well, right, well, you've got to where we wanted. But we just want a bit more, Sheikh. Want another 200 million. Want another bit of this. You've got £800 million there sat to go straight into United as a set-up investment pot. Well, we want some of that. So we know you've got more money. Same thing with the Sir Jim Ratcliffe side of things. You own £1 billion chemical, petrochemical organisation. You're buying United through that. So even if you only buy half of it, give us a bit more, Sir Jim. Give us a bit more for, I don't know, instead of giving us 2.5 for 50%, give us 3. Give us 3.5. You know, these are the sort of things that the Glazer family will do. They will push the buttons, absolutely. And I'm not being funny. Maybe in some people's minds, if you were in their position, you'd probably be doing the same thing. And if you believe anyway that your football club, when you were coming into it without any sort of financial analyst doing any of the numbers work or the future projection of United at £8 billion, then I mean it shows the sort of craziness that these guys live in the world. And the thing is, at £6 billion, United, and this might be a bit of a wild take that I'm going to make here, United's worth £6 billion if you're willing to do the work that needs doing at United. And the reason why I say that is, if you have a investment group of billionaires, or you have an investment bank behind you, private equity firm, or as you say, you have a sovereign wealth fund that are wanting to buy your football club, if they're prepared to pay £6 billion for it, and then they're prepared to build a new stadium, improve the training facilities, make sure that the men's, women's and youth teams are all sustainably run, and also that they're being successful year in, year out, or have the progression to do so, that will bring them big revenues in the long term. And the reason why I'm saying that is anybody who buys United and does all these things like a new stadium and all these things like that, will take 5 to 6 years to actually build. It's really, if I'm being honest, it's a 15-year project if you buy United, because you have 5-6 years to build things. You have about 2 years to then sustainably run it and make sure that you're actually making profits. And then anything from there, if you've got debts because of a new stadium, or, you know, if you've already paid it off because you've built it yourself from your own, you know, hand or will, well, then anything that you do after that is a major profit for yourselves. And then in the future, if you were to sell Manchester United, either from a sovereign wealth fund's perspective or even, you know, just a businessman's perspective, you're going to make double-digit billions. So suddenly that's £6 billion and maybe £2 billion of additional financing for a new stadium and the rest of it. If it's an £8 billion sort of investment you've put in to buy the club and then also improve it, and you can sell it for 10 billion, that's worth the while doing. And you've made your money. And I think really, if you build a new stadium at United and if Manchester United had what Tottenham had right now, new stadium, new training facilities, and the team was being successful in the field, United would be worth the £8 billion that the Glazer family are demanding.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of bidders would pay that sort of money for a football club that it's built, it's done, it's finished for us. The people have built it already for us. And in saying that, like you say, we're at the point where we are now, why there's no correspondence or cohesion with it. I think it's clear for everybody to see. The Glazer family are underwhelmed with the offers that they've got. And the reason why they're underwhelmed, rightly from what Mike Keegan said, from my understanding as well, is that they're underwhelmed based upon they haven't hit the £6 billion asking price. And they believe that because of everything that you can do with United, as I've just said here now, if anybody were to do that, that's where you're going to make your money back. So £6 billion in their eyes is for bidders is unreasonable right now, but for the Glazer family in their eyes and perspective, it's a brilliant investment for the long term because you're going to be making more money in the long term, albeit you're going to have to fork out a lot in the short term. You're at the point now where they're underwhelmed because you haven't hit their number, which they believe anyway in their eyes, interpret it in your own way if you will, they believe reasonable.
Fair enough, Chief. Thank you for that, Tom. And one last thing before I go to comments, and then we'll one last question about us, and we'll shift tack to talk about transfers. Big T says, can a company on the public stock market be sold in secret?
As far as I'm aware, no.
No, yeah,
I don't think they can. No, I think reason being is because if you were to do a private sale in secrecy, whilst it's on a publicly traded stock market, as Man United are in the case of New York Stock Exchange, and you have it with London Stock Exchange, etc. If you were to do a deal basically behind the stock exchange's back, it then manipulates their marketing systems based upon that nobody who has shares of United actually know what they're going to be getting in the long term, or if they're going to lose money. And put it this way, if they don't know what they're going to get, how can you then say in the long term, if then it comes out as, oh yeah, it's been sold, yada, 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 and so forth? It can. And the reason why it can is because if the New York Stock Exchange in Manchester United's case, because this is where it's based with, if they weren't disclosed or interpreted around what actually is going on with United, why are minority stakeholders already formulating against Sir Jim Ratcliffe? And the reason being why that is because they are being informed on the situation. They have to be. It's a publicly traded company. But in the same way, and the best example I can use, because it was a upwards of a quadruple £1 billion deal in $44 billion to buy Twitter for Elon Musk, he had to publicly announce that he'd bought Twitter, and then the stock exchanges at the time delisted
it's not called Twitter, it's called X.
Well, it's called X now, but it was called Twitter. It was called Twitter when he bought it. Anyway.
My goodness, man. Anyway, yeah, sorry, go on. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, in terms of, like I was saying with it, when it's a publicly traded stock market and you have people that are trading stock and shares and at different price points and depending on how it fluctuates, you cannot let somebody buy a share that they don't accurately know what they're going to get out of it in the long term. Because, put it this way, if they lose money because of it, they're going to sue. If they get more money out of it, they're probably going to be happy about it. But you run the risk of doing that. And therefore, you can't have a publicly traded company like Manchester United sold in secrecy. And if I'm being honest, the best interpretation, even if there was an announcement in place to say an agreement's been reached with Sir Jim Ratcliffe or an INEOS, an agreement's been reached with Sheikh Jassim or one of the minority investment groups, even if there was an announcement to say that, the time you will know when Manchester United is fully sold is when New York Stock Exchange no longer lists Manchester United as a publicly traded company. They won't make an announcement about it. They'll just pull it straight off the market. And all of the relevant shareholders and minority stakeholders via New York Stock Exchange will have been paid and finalised and sorted if it is to be a 100% sale of the football club, in, say, Sheikh Jassim's case. Therefore, when that happens, Manchester United sold. It's a private company. And as it stands right now, the only person that's offering to do a full sale at 100% and delist from New York Stock Exchange is Sheikh Jassim. That's when you know then that United have been sold as a football club, because they will no longer be a publicly traded company. It will be private, and it won't ever be put back on the New York Stock Exchange or any exchanges, as far as I'm aware, from Sheikh Jassim's point of view, if he has 100% shares of the football club. And that's how they do business. Whereas, say, in Sir Jim Ratcliffe's world, anything, and this is one thing that I learned about him, is anything that he normally buys or invests in, he invests a majority stake in it, so he has control of the asset, and then he buys everybody out over time. So this situation where you could have it where Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the Glazer family would stay as partners for years and years to come, as far as I'm aware, that wouldn't happen. It would be a simple case of he will buy them out. It might take a little bit of time, and you might have to bear with him, but he will buy them out at some point. And from there, and that position, he will then want to buy all the stakeholders out on New York Stock Exchange. So it will be a process, and for some people that will be a painful process based upon well, you're having to buy all these people out, the Glazer family, minority stakeholders. You've still got to put investment into United, and then there's still doubt that if you're actually going to pay the debt off, so that's an issue. And then there's also a situation that fans are going to want a new stadium. So there's a lot of money, and you don't really have a lot of resources to do a lot in the short term. So it would have to be a long-term project. And that's where, obviously, the issue comes for Sheikh Jassim and the backlash that he's received with the fans from his proposal.
Thanks for that, Tom, man. Appreciate it. I'm just going to see if there's any other questions. Well, obviously get your questions in for Tom, the journalist man. So, he is our go-to journalist when it comes to all things just football related in general, you know. So, yeah, please, and also make sure you follow him on Twitter at Tomjournalist1 as well. No BS here, just facts, really. No speculation, just facts. We don't do that on this channel. There were reports that Glazer will give an update after the US tour, which is done. You think it'll be... I wasn't really quite sure about those reports, to be honest. I mean, I don't know, again, Tom, is there any truth to that? The fact that when the US tour's over, essentially before pre-season, that they're going to give some sort of update, or was that just hearsay?
I'll be honest, it was hearsay in terms of that, and it was rumours. The only reason that people really can make a story out of that is, oh, well, it's almost as if they've got a last goodbye. You do a tour in their own country, they go to a couple of games. All right, now you're back in the UK, right, we'll ship you off and see you later. But one theory that's been held, and I know this anyway from people that I've spoken to anyway within Manchester United Supporters Trust, when they've tried to get an engagement with the Glazer family for years and it's never happened, apart from the fan advisory board, which has completely stopped since last year. They don't have regular meetings via that. So the one thing that I knew from them was that they had interpreted that the Glazer family had run the tour through the US to promote bidders. They were expecting to maybe get somebody else come to the party right here and now. And look, you could still, as I've always reiterated, and it's a wild take, but I've always used it as an example. You could have one day a Jeff Bezos, an Elon Musk, anybody who's a multi-billionaire and has the finances or has the resources in place to get money to buy United for £6 billion and pay for it tomorrow. There's nothing stopping these people waking up tomorrow and think, do you know what, I'll give these guys what they want and I'll buy Manchester United. There's nothing stopping them at all. And the reason and the theory behind it is that they want something big for this. And that's the big asking price of the £6 billion. And based upon it, would there be an update after it? No. But the theory anyway from the Supporters Trust had been, you know, it was almost like a slide theory, had been that the most, Glazer sort of thing to do would be shed loads of cash out of United, put sort of principles or agreements in place that, you know, any new owner can't really get out of for years, and then let the transfer market shut, maybe without giving Manchester United and the manager the full back in and support that he needs for the season. and then sell the club when the season's on.
Mm.
And again, if United have a couple of bad starts to the season like they did last season, a couple of losses on, the first 2 games, there's going to be an outcry. And maybe then that's when the Glazer family might decide, we've made his mind up now. Because we can sell this football club, give it to somebody else, it's their problem. And there's nothing then that new owner really can do. They can't sign any new players that can come in. They can't appoint any major, sporting director or anything mid-season or at the start of a season, because a lot of the best ones will be in jobs. And it's going to be very hard to negotiate with a club to get them. So in terms of having an update after the US tour, there's not really been that sort of theory behind it, especially from the US anyway. The one thing that's always been contained is when there's an agreement in place or they've come, or either one of the bidders has had enough, they will make it clear themselves. Whenever somebody has something to say from their side of things, they'll talk, whether it's positive or negative, whether they've bought the club, agreements in place, or they're pulling out. And as I've reiterated before, and I'll say it again as a final point, whenever one of the bidders, especially from Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Sheikh Jassim's side, whenever they know that they're not going to be successful in buying United, whether they've been told that or not, they will withdraw, they will pull out. And from that point, you can interpretate that, right, well, there's an agreement then with the others. And then from there, you will probably get that sort of news that will come out from close sources within Reign or close to the Glazer family that, an agreement's in place with the other party. And from there, finalise the details, Premier League, UEFA, bang, done. Manchester United's in new hands. And for good or for better, the Glazer family effectively would be out of control of United. And that's the one thing that they will not have if they sell to either Sheikh Jassim or Sir Jim Ratcliffe. They will not have control over anything at Manchester United. They will just have a stake with Sir Jim Ratcliffe, or they will be fully gone and never heard from ever again regarding Manchester United in Sheikh Jassim's case.
Thank you for that, Tom. Appreciate it, buddy. Appreciate it. Jason says, why isn't Main Street Press, US Stock Exchange, and Football World is trying to get answer on the Glazers for what they are doing? Probably because they don't care, unfortunately, Jason. That's the truth. I don't think they do. I don't. There's almost 90 of us in here. Like the vid, yes, please do like the vid if you are watching. If you're not new to if you're new to the channel, subscribe to the channel. A like doesn't cost anything. It helps the algorithm. We're on our road to 4K subscribers, guys. I'm just over 50 subscribers away from 4K, so I'd really appreciate it if we get to 4K subscribers as soon as we can. I'd really appreciate that. Just a think. Philly Fella says, I'm just interested in following your support so I can keep up with things because I only follow on Twitter Fabrizio Ornstein, Simon Stone, and Alfie Ladd. And fair enough. They're good journalists to follow. Actually, I don't follow many journalists myself. I only really look at Fabrizio Ornstein. Alfredo has been decent this window, to be fair. And obviously my man Tom here, so, but he DMs me specific things, so it's not like all over his Twitter page. And Tom says, is there any truth in Osimhen to Saudi? We'll talk about transfers in a second, so we'll come to transfers in a second, actually. I think RSV. I think my fear is that since the Glazers have appointed Erik ten Hag last year in April, they interviewed him and let him know he will be in full control of transfer and outgoing, so no more Glazeronomics. Okay, yeah, maybe. I think it's more the fact that I think Ten Hag wanted assurances that he was going to get control or he was going to get backed more than anything before he accepted the job, because he's obviously seen what's happened to Oli and Mourinho as well. Maybe that's it. Big up Bath Time in the chat. Hope he's doing well. Hope you're doing well, Bath Time. It's Wednesday. No news coming this week. Again, saw a minor update, obviously, with the Glazers. In summary, for those who are tuning in, the Glazers obviously still do want to sell the club. Just before we were saying, Tom, like you obviously mentioned in DM that you thought the Sheikh Jassim camp is still confident. To remind me, like, why Why? What do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, the sort of murmurs coming from the Sheikh Jassim camp that we heard from over the last couple of days had been that they believe that the offer that they've put in place suffices anybody to sell anything. If you had one individual in this situation, and this is where they have used the theory, or the sort of murmur come out of the camp from them has been, if we were dealing with an individual and we offered them the sort of money that we're offering them, a world record fee for a sporting franchise, then if it was an individual, it's money that one person cannot turn down. That's the sort of feeling. And from the Sir Jim Ratcliffe case, it's the same feeling. But the problem is they have to satisfy 6 members of the family, the 6 siblings, Joel, Avram, Darcy, Brian, Edward, a lot of them. They have to get an agreement for all of them to be happy, not just a majority. And that's really the problem where we are now in terms of the Sheikh Jassim group are confident that they will prevail, that they will get an agreement in place. And they've never doubted their own sort of resources or their way that they've conducted themselves in the process. They've not completely given up, but they have dwindled on the idea of, do they actually want to sell? Because why have they not gone with us yet? And from the Sheikh Jassim side, they understand that the £6 billion asking price, they have not met it. They understand that, obviously. They know what they've bid. But they believe what they've put in place and the offer that provides for the Glazer family here and now is a world record figure for a sporting franchise, but it's also best for the football club and the future of it, because it includes a debt removal, it includes a potential stadium redevelopment, it includes significant figures available for all managers, men's team manager, women's team manager, youth team set up. It provides the facilities for a future, and that's where they believe that their offer suffices any bidder to sell to them. And again, we're at the point where I'm just saying what I'm hearing from their side of things. That's not what the Glazer family are interested in. They just care about what they're getting here and now. They don't care if they sell it to somebody who's going to build a new stadium or who's going to knock the one down and you're just going to play on rough turf. That's it. They don't care. If they get £6 billion or the money that they're looking for, that's it. They're not bothered who they sell it to or why. That's just what they want. And again, until they get that sort of principle and offer in place, they're not going to sell the football club. And as far as we are now, nobody has met the asking price. And therefore, this theory that the process had been paused isn't true. The understanding is that the Glazer family have never been good decision makers or quick decision makers. They always take their time with anything. Therefore, now, something that actually implicates them and potentially their future control or, even just ownership of Manchester United, they have to consider it as all 6 members. And this isn't an excuse on behalf of the Glazer family. This is just what I'm going to say in terms of the perspective. The way that you have to look at it is, if this was one individual, they wouldn't need this much time to decide. But unless you have all 6 siblings, and that's when you then know that a decision can be made, unless all 6 of them agree for what they want to do with the football club, there's not going to be a decision. That's the problem. And until you have all 6 in agreement on what they want to do or what they think's best for them to do as a family, then you're not going to have the decision that anybody wants. And that's why, if this was an individual, I think this would have already been wrapped up a couple of weeks ago, if I'm being completely honest. And you might have new owners before the start of the season, maybe not to implicate the transfer window, but you'd have certainly passed probably Premier League approval and UEFA by now. And then you would have the keys to United, but you probably won't be able to implicate in anything towards the transfer market, especially for this summer anyway. But the problem is, until you have all 6 of them in agreement, you're not going to have the decision that you want. And you could have 5 of them that say, yeah, we want to fully sell Sheikh Jassim. But if you have one of them that has that slight doubt, and the one that I understood from at least 2 weeks ago that was a little bit murmuring, and I said it even before that the reports came out around that Premier League TV right deals are going through the roof now in terms of the investment that it takes to actually own a Premier League football club. The money that you can make from TV deals, but also the Champions League, place for finishing 5th is there now.
Yeah.
You can still get Champions League football for finishing 5th, and you get the same money as if somebody finishes 1st.
Yeah.
So long as they don't go on to win the Champions League, because they would obviously get more. So there is that element of doubt there from United's perspective, because the Glazer family still look at these things and think, well, we can get more money in the future. We can still run this football club.
Yeah.
But nothing will change. It will just stay the same as it is.
Yeah.
And if I'm being completely honest, I don't believe the Glazer family are people where they'll even take a loan of £1 billion and build a new stadium. I don't think they've got the stomach for it. I really don't, because you first of all have to get the money to actually build it. Then you have to actually get planners in place to design it, which takes months. And then you have to actually build it, which is going to take, as far as I was aware, 5 years if you wanted to build a brand new one, similar to how Tottenham is, but more capacity seating. If you want to do that, it's going to take upwards of 5 years. 5 years, £1 billion. Like, you, as I say, you're going to be here 15 years till you make any sort of investment or money back, and then you can demand £8 to £10 billion for your football club, because it will be worth that then, because you have everything new or up to date. But that's why I believe with these guys, I don't think they've got the time for it.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Let me just quickly skim some, and then we'll move on to transfer news, because we've almost been an hour talking about Takeover. So let's go into some transfer news as well. Something a bit more bitty would be good. Let me think. See, and since the Glazers thing that my Ben Fergie, once we start winning every the value club will massively increase, they can sell much as well. Let's see if we start winning those things, because personally for me, I think part of the reason has been the case of ownership. So they're thinking we're going to start winning, but they'd be stupid to think that the cycle can't repeat itself as it's done. Sheikh says, let's get those likes up, guys. Get those likes up. Bath Time says, does Tom have any news on the giant snake spotted in the Thames today? I assume that's an inside joke. Alfredo, Alfredo, I've forgotten his surname, but I think he's an Italian journalist guy. I think he's more of Italian transfers. He was, because obviously United have been linked with a lot of Italian football players. So he was a common Italian journalist. So he was the one that helped break the news regarding about Onana.
And Alfredo Padula, if anybody's
Alfredo
interested.
Padula, that's it. Yes, Onana, Hojlund, and even now Amrabat, so to speak. So, but it seems to be mostly around Italian Italian transfers. Arsenal says, Tom, also, are there any rumors that the Glazers want to sell more shares at a high price after using the Qatari bid to boost the value? That's illegal if they're trying to manipulate the stock market. I assume that they're not. They know that they can't do that, Tom.
Of course they know that they can't. They have legal teams and everything that will advise them on these things. But even in saying that, if they want to sell the shares for higher prices, technically they can charge whatever they want to whoever wants to buy a share in United, but it wouldn't be via the stock exchange. You would have to buy it from them. And from that perspective, that's how, say, the Sir Jim Ratcliffe bid works, because he's buying their shares, not the New York Stock Exchange shares. So it doesn't implicate them, but it just means that they can't accurately value their shares or what they're worth. Hence, then there's a legal, battle there, or potentially implication that implicates both a bidder but also a seller in terms of their shares, what they want to sell. And it doesn't matter if it's one share or the whole 69, it still implicates them based upon if they don't plan to then buy out the other shareholders or have a relationship with them where they can buy them out in the future. That's the difference, and that's why.
Hojlund transfer's done. Yeah, tonight was actually going to be a welcome to Manchester United Hojlund a video. Actually, that was what initially it was. This was going to be planned as. However, it looks like the Hojlund announcement is going to be delayed probably till this sort of weekend. So I thought I would just delay it to the announcement video to the weekend when he's kind of near to be officially confirmed, whilst obviously doing the season preview as well. So yes, because that's where I think. Let's have a look. Yeah, I think it's getting available on the weekend. Exactly. That's why I said push it down. Feels been easy to do pre-season. All right, is that? I assume the fees and money being pumped into the game from Saudi has turned the Glazers' heads, Tom. That is an interesting thing, So, but I assume that what the Glazers think that they. I mean, to be honest, like, what is it? I mean, how much do we really get for the players that were gone? We've only sold, I think, Tellez there, and I don't think we sold him for more than 10 million, did we?
No, and some of it. So I think 6 or 8 of it's in add-on, straight up figure, and then some of it's in add-ons. I think like 2 million of it's in add-ons.
Exactly. So I think
it's to one of PAF's stronghold clubs in Al Nassr. So it will probably just be straight up cash, but I'm not 100% certain. I'd have to double check.
Yeah. Jason, my point was, why are the football bodies letting the Glazers ruin Manchester United? We're now being caught up with FAP and getting fined 7 months because FAP was brought in to stop this. I don't know what to tell you, Jason. Like I don't think the football bodies really get. I don't think the footballers really care. I'm not saying that. I get the frustration, but I don't think they care. They're just like, these are the rules. This is what you've got to follow. It is what it is. That's what I think. I don't think they have any real preference or favorites to Manchester United and other big teams. Relax, bath time. Relax. Let me quickly go. Okay. Yes. Okay. Super chat from King Stash. Thank you, buddy. Long time subscriber as well. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the donation. Thank you so much. Eric Ten Hag said the first team / senior players play selfishly or as individuals and don't follow the tactical plan. Are some of our youth players and fringe players better than the starters? That's actually good. That's a good question for the Q&A, King Stash, on Friday, which we'll be doing. And that's a good segue to the transfer talk. But yeah, if I'm honest, and obviously I'll let Tom answer this as well. If I'm honest, those comments by Ten Hag had me a little bit worried. No, not a little bit, quite a lot worried. Because the whole point of pre-season is that you're supposed to sort of build towards the season. Be together, be a team, etc. Whatever you say about Manchester City, Liverpool, etc. Part of the reason why they've been successful is that they are a team, and they're a function unit. And the fact that we're still hearing that some people are selfish, some people do this, some people do that, for me, is a worry. And I think a lot of that is also, quite frankly, because a lot of these players are actually on high wages. I don't think that helps. I think a lot of people are like, yes, Marcus Rashford signed a new contract. He's getting paid loads of money. Well, okay, yeah. But just think about it. We've signed Hojlund. Do you really think that Marcus Rashford, the highest paid player at Manchester United, is going to square the ball to Hojlund when he's through on goal? You know what I mean? So I hope he does. But I've noticed last season and even the season before that, he was getting increasingly selfish. So there were a lot of times this season where like, we could have scored this goal, we could have done this, we should have been this, but like our attacking, whatever people say about him, people are going to celebrate about they banter McTominay and Fred and Maguire and all these places. But the reality, to be honest, is, and even to a certain extent on the Ollie, like a lot of our attackers, and I've said this quite a few times, a lot of our attackers get passes. Like, we criticize the defense a lot, we criticize the keeper, we criticize the midfield, but for some reason, everyone just says like, yeah, Rashford's amazing, Sancho's amazing, Martial's, okay, not Weghorst, so Martial's amazing. They just get passes all the time. And it's like, oh, it's because we don't create enough chances. No, we create a lot of chances, actually. We've been creating more chances, I think, this season than last season. But you know what? We don't put them away. We're not clinical enough. A lot of our front four players are selfish, and worse, some of them don't even track back. So I blame a lot of that on I think the selfishness, for me, a lot of it comes from the attackers. If he's talking about selfish, I think a lot of it comes from the attackers, because so many games last season, and the Sevilla one at Old Trafford was a good one, where I was like, we dominated these guys. We should have been 5. If this was City, 5, 6, 7-0, no problem. We should have been 5, 6, 7-0. And yes, I know we didn't have a striker, but at the end of the day, there were chances where, hey, Bruno should have really passed that. Rashford had an open goal. Hey, Rashford, you know what? Maybe should have taken a bit of a touch, and we didn't. And yes, people blame Maguire and Malacia, not good, etc., etc. But I'm sorry, but I'm so tired of our 4 players getting a pass. They miss 3 chances. Rashford or Anthony or Sancho, whatever. You have 3 big chances in one game, and you can't take any of them, or none of them go on target. And it's like, oh yeah, but Maguire made a mistake, or Malacia made a mistake, or Fred or Casemiro or whatever made a mistake. So yeah, we lost the game because of them. No, stop that nonsense. No. Our attackers need to be better. Sorry, that's my mini rant. I'll save that for the United preview, because I've got a lot of stuff to say about this team going in, because unlike a lot of Manchester United fans, I am actually not confident about this season. I'm not. I for some reason, I have a sense that something is going to go wrong. I can't explain it, but I just have a feeling that it's not going to be as easy as people would have, because quite frankly, Anana hopefully makes us better, but this is still his first debut in the Premier League, and he's from Serie A. So you don't know what's going to happen. Every other sign that we made so far, I don't know whether it actually even improves us. Hojlund is a risk. Mount, in my opinion, is average. And Amrabat, for me, is a Moroccan Fred at this point. I know he had a good World Cup, but he got dominated by the West Ham midfield in the Conference League final. So we'll see what happens. That's my thing. I mean, Tom, do you have any just some brief thoughts about the transfers? I know that was a bit of a rant there. But...
Well, the one thing anyway that we knew from obviously what happened with the Rasmus Hojlund agreement, United really, if I'm being completely honest, they ended up caving in and they paid what Atalanta were willing to drop to, essentially. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they said, look, we'll drop to a 85 million sort of euros package price, most of the money would be up front, and then we'll give you the add-ons over time, some of which are inclusive of that they're easy add-ons, so essentially appearances, number of goals potentially for first season, maybe like 10, if you got 10 goals then they pay an agreement there. But then the other ones, which are more of the serious add-ons, is what then they go to and say, oh right, well if you win the Premier League, win the Champions League, we get an extra 5 million euros or something like that. That's the sort of figures that we're looking at in terms of the add-ons for the profile. But the thing is that Erik ten Hag had stressed to the recruitment staff, I need a striker this summer. I need one of really 3 names that I knew that Ten Hag was interested in terms of him and his coaching staff for the striker that they perceived as being good. They said that there was only one ready-made striker that they was interested in getting this summer, and that was Harry Kane. And they, from United's perspective, they didn't want a saga of all summer trying to chase one player. So they went and said, no, we're going to prioritise 3 other positions. And Erik ten Hag, once he understood that Harry Kane was not going to be a starter, in terms of that they wouldn't have been able to get a deal done in weeks, it would have probably taken at least a month, maybe 2 months, even if they could have got an agreement at all, then that would have been the whole budget just on one player. He'd come round to the idea of, well, let's invest in 3 different areas. David De Gea wasn't so good last season. I want a new goalkeeper. Get me a proactive, sort of technical midfielder that can press. Mason Mount probably fits that profile if you want to astute with that. Then he said, all right, well, now I want a number 9. And the way that Ten Hag had looked at it was after Harry Kane, there was only 2 names he was ever interested in. That was Randall Colomwani and Rasmus Hojlund. And United, as recruitment team, had followed Hojlund ever since he'd left FC Copenhagen in Denmark, and he went to Austria, and then from Austria to Atalanta, and then this now comes to United. He's moved every single summer since he's left Copenhagen, and he's developed as a very good young player. And from there, United's recruitment team had followed Hojlund as a young player based upon his profile and his attributes, not so much around the statistics, but him just as a player and a profile and the potential that he has. And Erik Ten Hag and his staff had followed this young player as well. And you look at it from this perspective, it's the sort of player that an Ajax youth sort of system or scouting network would try and bring to their youth team, and then in a couple of years would make the first team. The similar thinking to how Erik Ten Hag would think around certain players and recruitment. So hence Rasmus Hojlund was the name that they've ended up pursuing and going for. It was that the club also knew the player and had followed the player, but also the manager had. So really it went hand in hand, and they've ended up getting the player, albeit they've overpaid for it, absolutely. And this now we're at the point where first part of the medical's been done. As far as I'm aware, the second part of the medical's been done. He's had some media duties which have been postponed until tomorrow, for which he'd have to do his media sort of duties and interview, etc. And from there, United are working in the background around sort of the visa and sort of working permits, so forth, which takes a little bit of time, and it's taking longer than they had expected, but it's very likely that an announcement will happen at the weekend following on either before or after the Lens sort of game. But I think an agreement probably, an announcement agreement will be imminent probably from the weekend, really. And then where do they go from there? Well, it depends on the sort of income that they can bring in from sales. And as I've said before, if one of the midfielders goes, United want to recruit another. So if you have Donny van der Beek potentially goes to Sociedad, or Fred goes to Turkey, Saudi Arabia, one of the clubs that's interested in him, they want to bring in one more.
Sorry to interrupt you, Tom. That is a perfect transition just as into obviously the latest MEFC news because we've been seeing some stuff around. I've been seeing some stuff on Twitter about, and we're just going to shift to transfer news, guys, just as we begin to wrap this up, about there being a mystery Premier League unnamed club that is interested in bidding for Caicedo, and obviously United interested in midfielder. I mean, Tom, is there a chance? That Manchester United will hijack this Chelsea deal and bid for Moises Caicedo and bring him? Because if I'm honest, Tom, if we sign Caicedo, my expectation of season goes up. It does over Amrabat. I'll be honest, So is there a chance at all, Tom? Is there a chance?
As far as I'm aware, regarding the sort of mystery bidder from with Caicedo, I don't believe that there is this mystery bidder.
Okay.
There was sort of the rumouring around that Liverpool weren't happy with the Lavia talks with Southampton, so they'd put a bid for Caicedo. Sources close to Liverpool have insisted that they aren't interested in Caicedo and they're still pursuing a deal for Lavia. United, when they were prepared to walk away from the Mason Mount deal, which they were prepared to do so, Caicedo was the player that they were moving on to. And they were prepared to pay upwards of £80 million to get him, if that was the sort of figure that they were. But the theory that's come from Brighton, really, is that they believe that this sort of rumour has been a leak from Chelsea to say we're not the only ones that are interested in buying Caicedo, and there's another club that's actively bidding for him, to then prevail and give some sort of bidding war, essentially. And from there, you can say that it helps Brighton out because it gives them more options if it is true. But as far as I'm aware, this is a classic Chelsea negotiation tactic. You say that there's more clubs interested, but there isn't, and therefore the player can then hesitate for a move to think, I might not actually get to go to the club that I want to go to because the other mystery club might bid more than the club I actually want to go to in Chelsea. But as far as I'm aware, United aren't this mystery club. And I don't know who this mystery club is, even if there is one to begin with. But even if there was to begin with anyway, I don't see why United would bring in a player like Caicedo when the priority that they want to go for is Amrabat after they get player sales. So even if United were in this sort of mystery pose to buy Moses Caicedo, it's very unlikely that they would actually be able to follow through with it because they haven't sold any significant players for massive value yet. You still have a situation with Dean Henderson potentially going to Forest. You still have a situation with Fred might be going Turkey. One day it's Turkey, next it's Saudi Arabia, Fulham. And you've still got fringe players. Harry Maguire, potentially West Ham are looking at putting in another bid for him, upwards of 25, 30 million pounds, take it or leave it. So, until United regenerate some money into the coffers, they can't bid for anybody. And even if they do get the money in, the understanding that I have is that they're going to go for Amrabat and that they have a communication there with Fiorentina. They know what the asking price is for Amrabat. As far as I'm aware, it's around between 30 to 35 million euros, which I think is really a steal for a player like Amrabat at that sort of rate and price. And the player, from the perspective, is that he's already said yes to Manchester United. He's prioritised a move to Manchester United if it comes to fruition. Liverpool had tried to contact his camp. Chelsea have contacted his camp. And he said, no, I want to go to Manchester United. If that's the club where I can go to, and they're interested in coming for me, and Fiorentina can agree a fee with him, which I have to respect that as a player of the club, and I've wore the captain's armband at Fiorentina, then I want to go to Manchester United. And that takes priority over anybody else. And Rasmus Hojlund did the same thing when PSG come knocking to the door and offered him a massive lucrative contract for a 20-year-old. But he still said no because he wanted to come to Manchester United. So this mystery bidder for Caicedo, if I'm being honest, I don't know for sure, but I don't believe there is any mystery bidder. I think this is just media speculation coming up, and then it plays more onto the player that, well, somebody might pay Brighton's asking price and I might not actually get to go where I want to go to. So if Chelsea use that, right, that's almost a notion to Moises Caicedo to say, listen, lad, kick up a fuss or you won't be able to come to us, the club that you actually want to come to. But like I say, even you look at the Premier League landscape, right now in this situation, if this mystery bidder even existed, I think really there's only one club that can reasonably pay £80 million or bid that, and they could actually follow through on it right now, and that's Manchester City. I don't see another club that can do it right now. Liverpool, they're pursuing Lavia. Arsenal just bought Rice for over £100 million package deal. You've then got, Chelsea, who we already know are one of the interested clubs. United need to sell players before they can buy anybody else. Spurs, I'd be really shocked if that's something that they would have done.
Newcastle?
So, Newcastle maybe. Well, they do have the Champions League, but again, they have FFP constraints as well because they've spent a lot of money based upon they don't have the high revenue that a top six club has right now. So they have FFP concerns as well. So that's why maybe Tonali's their superstar midfielder that they bought. But look, there's nothing stopping a club breaching FFP if they want to bid for Caicedo. But I don't believe anyway that there is any mystery bidder. But I don't know for that for sure.
Speaking on obviously midfielders, as Gino says, when will the Amrabat deal get done exactly? So is there any sort of I'd assume that a bid hasn't gone in yet. So, but what's the expectation of getting Amrabat done, Tom?
Well, the expectation is that it's very likely that United can agree a fee with Fiorentina for him. However, the problem that is facing really the whole thing is that United I think it's very clear that United would have £20 million to spend to buy, Sofian Amrabat right here and now. But the problem that they have is that because of how FFP is so tight around them, they've already overpaid for Rasmus Hojlund, which is very close to the fine line of the FFP regulations. But by selling Alanga, by selling, your odd player, Nathan Bishop, Zidane Iqbal, Tellez, these sort of numbers are adding up together. It gives them that extra money to then overpay for Hojlund and still not breach the FFP regulations. So that's why I say if they sold Harry Maguire for 30 million, then they can pay the 20 million asking price or 35 million euros, negotiate a deal with Fiorentina and get Amrabat. It can happen. But when will it happen? Me personally, I don't believe that a deal like that, because it means that a lot of more moving parts have to happen before they can actually get Amrabat. It's going to take weeks. That's the problem. So, if I'm being completely honest, the transfer window won't be shut on the first day of the season when they play Wolves. I think he would have, if you're going to get Amrabat, it would have to be after the season's already started at some point then, because it gives United the wiggle room to then go and get the sales necessarily that they need from players to then not breach the FFP, but they can still bring in Sophie and Amrabat. And as I say, the players sitting there right now waiting for Manchester United. So it's not really a case of United biding for time because loads of clubs are interested in him. They are, but he's giving priority to Manchester United. That's the difference.
Fair enough. Hope that answers your question, Gene. Do we have any other transfer questions in the chat? So can you just give us a bit of just a transfer update just on, I think it seems like obviously Amrabat is the main one United are linked with. Can you give us a bit of an update just regarding player departures, Tom?
In terms of the sort of departures, Dean Henderson's obviously, I think, been the major sort of name with Forest. And there is a situation where potentially the deal could collapse. And the reason why it could collapse is United have agreed that they initially wanted a sale of the player. They're happy to agree a loan based upon that they get an obligation to buy. And at first, the sources close to Nottingham Forest had insisted that they were willing to actually do that if the figure was right. Now, the theory coming from Manchester United is that Nottingham Forest have pulled a U-turn on what they actually were willing to do and saying, no, we want an option, not an obligation. And the reason why they want an option is they still have goalkeepers here and now that they can still keep for another year. Keylor Navas, for example, is a prime example. Experienced veteran goalkeeper that you can have for a year in the Premier League. No problem at all. So they want to have the situation where it's only an option that they can exercise to actually buy him. And because he had a couple of injury problems last season, that's also in the minds of Forest to say, are we buying somebody else's problem in terms of because of his injury record? And he does have a little bit of a pattern of arm injuries, knee sort of strains, ankle. He's a very fragile player. That's the problem. And I could be wrong in saying this. Ever since he's been to a Premier League club, either with Sheffield United, Manchester United, or Nottingham Forest, I don't think he's ever completed a full season. I could be wrong in saying that. I think he has missed a couple of games each season with an injury. So that does play a factor. So the Henderson sort of deal, it still talks are on with Manchester United and Nottingham Forest. And look, they managed to exercise a deal for Anthony Elanga. So I still think there is that sort of relationship between the two clubs, but it depends on who blinks first, really. And because United want more money back into the coffers right now, they're going to have to stand strong and hold strong and say, no, we want an obligation. And if they don't get that obligation, then there's no deal. That's the problem. So then Henderson really is not an asset that's really sellable if they can't get an obligation in place. Because an option doesn't give them the security that they're actually going to be paid out money. Whereas an obligation, they have to pay it. Therefore, that they already know that is coming to them 100% because it's in principle and it's an agreement. So there's that situation there. Fred, as I say, Galatasaray are floating around with different numbers that they're willing to pay for Fred. And my understanding anyway regarding Fred is that he has a preference to go to Galatasaray based upon they are in the Champions League. And the money that Saudi Arabian clubs are looking at offering him, he doesn't actually believe that the numbers that they're offering him suffices him as a player. He sees himself as, look, I'm not the world-renowned midfielder, but I've got experience. I've played at a very high level for numerous years at one of the biggest clubs in Europe, if not the biggest, in Manchester United. So you can afford to pay me a little bit more. And from there, like you say, Fulham as well, still interested. But the feeling was United were asking for £20 million, and they're now willing to drop to 15 for Fred. But Fred's a player who, and this might not seem nice for maybe Manchester United fans to say, Fred's a player who's a likeable character at United. He's a very likeable member of the squad. And the manager rates Fred as a member of the team, not just as a player, but also a personality. The club believe that he's a brilliant personality for the football club. He's always a positive, sort of enthusiastic character, as far as I'm aware, from him in and around the training ground. And effectively, it's almost a case of they want to do good by themselves, but also the player, because there is that connection with themselves and the player in that case. So they're willing to do a deal for Fred. That's the difference. And like you say, Donny van de Beek, initially had been expected that Sociedad were only interested in a loan for an obligation to buy, but they're actually looking at potentially buying him outright. And Sociedad had been interested along with Ajax potentially, and there was a couple of other Italian clubs that were interested in Donny van de Beek who haven't formalised interest as we speak right now, had looked at Van de Beek, but only on a loan. Sociedad had, when he went on tour, they were looking at a loan with an obligation or option, but now they're willing to buy him outright based upon the performances that he's shown on the pre-season tour. He's got a couple of goals, he's got a couple of assists, and the sort of movement that he's shown in and around the 18-yard box. Real Sociedad are going to miss that with David Silva now retiring.
That's true.
So they need that sort of player again. And Donny van de Beek fits that sort of profile of a David Silva similar-like player. Not like for like, but similar characteristics. And a younger version of David Silva. So it gives them that added quality there. And the feeling is that United want upwards of 25 million. If I'm being honest, I think they'd be lucky to get 18, 20. But again, depends what Sociedad are willing to pay, and depends if Donny van de Beek even wants to go to Real Sociedad, which still I don't have a clear understanding on that question. So it depends on a lot of factors, really, but there is interest there. And like I say, just to round up, I guess, on all the players, Manchester United's players that they're looking at selling, they have a lot of interest in a lot of their players, but the problem is a lot of these clubs aren't following up on the interest based upon what they've seen from pre-season and from last season. Let me have it like this. You have a Harry Maguire that plays 38 games of a Premier League season. Irrespective of how he does performance-wise, a lot more clubs are going to be interested in him and will probably follow up on that interest based upon he's an active player. Whereas right now, he's not played that many games for United last season. As a matter of respect, he's probably played a few shorter for England than he has maybe for Manchester United. His appearances for England and United will probably be very similar in terms of starts. And in saying that, that's where we are in terms of the position now, where you have a player who's not necessarily active in the same way that maybe you have a player like Scott McTominay that might be surplus to requirements because you brought in Mason Mount and might be bringing in Sofian Amrabat. Because you're bringing in these players to then take over those roles, it's then giving these sort of signals and jars, if you like, that, well, you then have a player that's surplus to requirements, which, why would we want to buy somebody else's, backup? If he's not good enough to be a first there, why would he be good enough to be a first here? And so forth. So you do have clubs that do think in this sort of way and operate. But again, like I said, there's a lot of clubs that are interested in United's players, but they just haven't followed up on the interest. But the one thing anyway that normally happens with a lot of clubs is when it gets quartering towards the end of the window, they start moving the legwork before the transfer window shuts. So you could have a situation where United are still selling players on deadline day or trying to get deals for players to be sold on deadline day. But they want to get all the players that they want in right here and now before deadline day. That's the difference.
Is there any headway on the whole McTominay going to West Ham situation? West Ham bid for him, but they reject. I assume it's similar for Harry Maguire as well.
Yeah. Well, West Ham have bid for a couple of players now. They've bid for Harry Maguire at a low ball 20 million, and United rejected out of hand. They want more money up front to sell Harry Maguire straight away. And the understanding that I had was they initially, before coming into the window, they wanted 50, but they're prepared to ask for 40. And they're not willing to budge over 40. And that's that's half of what West Ham actually bid. Again, McTominay, West Ham haven't actually placed a bid for him. And he isn't their priority midfielder that they wanted. They initially wanted James Ward-Prowse, which they bid 20 million for, and Southampton wanted 50. So, again, they've pulled away from the negotiations for Ward-Prowse. They might go to United for McTominay, but McTominay, again, United willing to ask for 40, 45, similar to what they were getting quoted for James Ward-Prowse. So there is a problem in a situation there with United that they could potentially price a lot of their players out of the market, but it's not so much if they're willing to get priced out of the market, because with a club like West Ham, they have the money. That's the difference. They've literally just got an agreement in place. They already have £70 million right now, and the other £30 million is going to be paid in another instalment from the Declan Rice money next season. So they already have 70 million now. So theoretically, if you paid the 30 for Harry Maguire, or you do a deal at that sort of rate, you pay the 40 for McTominay, right, that's 70 million pounds. We value our two players at 70. We know you've got 70 right now. Therefore, we can demand these sort of figures and prices. So McTominay to West Ham, there's not been any bids. There's not been any sort of talks with sort of Scott McTominay's agent and inner circle. But West Ham are definitely interested in him. And look, because they've moved on from James Ward-Prowse and they're not willing to pursue that deal, maybe they might go for McTominay, or they might go for another midfield target. That's the one thing that we don't know, and that's unclear again this far.
Thank you for that, Tom. Appreciate it. Right. Okay. Well, I think we're now. I think we're going to round up here, guys. But thank you guys so much, everyone who's listening to the chat. Thank you, Tom, for coming on as usual. Obviously, we've got in the shows, we've got the Red Devil weekly Q&A. So that's going to be on Friday. Then on the weekend, we'll hopefully Rasmus Hojlund will be announced. So we'll be doing a show about Rasmus Hojlund and seeing how he'll integrate into the Manchester United team on the weekend. And hopefully Sunday evening will be our Manchester United season preview, getting a bunch of Manchester United fans to preview the season, to really see where Manchester United are going to be. It's going to be interesting, but we'll see what happens. But remember, guys, if you're on your channel, remember to like, share, and subscribe to Red Devil Studio. Make sure you check out and follow Tom at Tomjournalist1. Make sure you follow me at WeAreUnitedX. That's me on Twitter. If you haven't subscribed already, subscribe to the channel. Consider subscribing to the second channels, Red Marv and Red Devil Studio Extra. Have a nice day, everyone. And cheers. Peace.